The other state revenue line item, you see there's a $5.4 million increase from what we're expecting to receive in the current year, and that's that one-time mandated cost funding that I mentioned that's coming from the state. And this will be the line item that we'll see an even greater change when we get to adopted budget due to that increase in the one-time funding. So overall, again, our revenues, we're planning on receiving about $121.3 million, which is $12.1 million more than what we think we'll receive in the current fiscal year. So now moving into the expenditure summary. The expenditures are broken down by major classification. So we have our academic salaries, and you see there that we're planning on having an increase in our academic salaries of just under $3.5 million. That's directly related to the 27 new full-time faculty positions, as well as the step increases that are in effect due to the CCA negotiations that was ratified past November of 2014. On the classified salaries, at this point, we are budgeting about a $1.7 million increase from where we think that we'll end the year in 14-15. This is related to the 44 positions that have been reinstated, as well as step and column increases. Now, I will say that the AFT salary schedule that was just ratified by the board, those estimates are not represented in any of these numbers because that was done after the budget was finalized. So at adopted budget, our estimated actuals will obviously increase due to the retroactive raise, and then the tentative budget will increase as well. So you will see a large change on the classified salary line item when we get to adopted budget. The benefits are increasing by just under $4.8 million. I already covered the significant benefit increases that we had there. And then on the services side, there's a $3.6 million increase in the services, and that is primarily related to the mandated cost allocations, as well as the election expense for the upcoming election that is underway for April of 2016. Under the capital outlay line, an increase of $1.6 million. Again, this is related to the one-time funding with the mandated costs, and so that's for the technology refresh program, as well as instructional equipment allocations that have been made. And under the other outgo line item, that increase of $2.1 million is primarily related to scheduled maintenance projects that have been allocated out of the mandated cost funds. So overall, the tentative budget, we're planning on spending $125.2 million, which is a $17.3 million increase over what we're spending in the 14-15 fiscal year. So graphically, what do our expenditures look like? You can see here that we're spending about 40% on our academic salaries, 20% on classified salaries, just under 24% on benefits, which represents 83.8% on salaries and benefits. Now, if we were to take out that $6.2 million in one-time funds, that percentage of salary and benefits goes up to 88.2%. So, you know, this looks artificially low, and you'll see in a couple slides later where we look at the 7-year trend that this does look artificially low. And so when you back out that one-time money, it is back up to 88.2, which is a little bit closer to where we normally are with our salary and benefit percentages.
Vice President Gable, don't we get offset by the money, though, for that $6 million? So it shouldn't spike this chart because it'll be offset by the money we receive, isn't it? The one-time money.
This chart is representing expenditures only.
I understand that, but when you say it'll spike once that one-time money kicks in, not necessarily because it gets offset. It arbitrarily gets offset to spike to 83%, but that cost gets covered by the one-time money, or am I mistaken?
What this chart is doing is looking at the total of the 120 $5.2 million and breaking it down by each of the major classifications, how much are we spending? So if we backed out that 6.2 million from the 125.2 million, then the percentages would change.
Right, but in turn, it should go up in our revenue side, shouldn't it? Since we're receiving money.
Well, yes, we do.
6.2.
It is, there's no impact on our ending fund balance with the one-time money because the revenue amount is the exact same amount as our expenditure amount. But what this graph is trying to depict is where are our expenditures going and in what classification are we spending our money. So this includes the 6.2 million, which I said is primarily going into the services, the capital outlay, and the other outgo categories. And so if we were to back out those one-time funds of 6.2 million, our salaries and benefits would now be at over 88%.
Yeah, so if I can add, Trustee Zia, the point of this slide is to show that there is very little room for discretionary spending. So if you backed out that one-time infusion of funds, it would even get smaller. So that is a caution to the board that salaries and benefits are taking a bigger and bigger portion of the overall expenditures. So our ability to spend money on programs and services begins to shrink, basically.
Well, I appreciate that, but that's $6.2 million. It seems like it's pretty. Earlier, when we were talking about it, seems like we're going to get it. So it's not that it's uncertain, or am I missing something?
Yes, the point here is that is a one-time.
Right. No, I get that.
So you are raising salaries for the long term of the college. You are receiving one-time funds that shrinks this pie, that changes the outlook of this pie, but you have to keep in mind what the pie looks like for the indefinite future of the college, because we pay salaries and benefits every year. So that 6.2 is only going to be in the budget this coming fiscal year.
Well, aren't we looking at this coming fiscal year's budget to begin with?
Yes, Trustee Zia, but academic salaries, benefits are ongoing expenditures. So you are obligating the college to those ongoing expenditures even though you only have one-time funds available.
So moving into a breakdown of our reserves, as I said, the budget does have about a $3.9 million deficit, which will bring our ending fund balance or our reserve balance down to just under 18.6 million, which is 14.8% of our total expenditures. And then there you see the different assignments and classifications of our reserves. We have our board mandated reserve, which is the 5.5% of expenditures of 6.9 million. We have the additional reserve for the institutional effectiveness goal, which is 7.8 million. And then we have our assigned reserves for the potential enrollment shortfall, the 1.22. That's equivalent to the growth revenue. And as I said, we need to earn the growth revenue before we spend it. So we want to set that aside in our reserves to make sure we've earned it before we spend it. And we have our vacation and load banking reserve of 2.6 million. So overall, our total reserves, again, are just under $18.6 million.
And that additional reserve, Vice President Gable, for institutional effectiveness goal, is this something that was recently been allocated by the Chancellor's office, or has it always been the case?
No, this is a new goal that the Chancellor's office has required all the districts to establish, and they wanted us to establish an institutional effectiveness goal for what our fund balance reserve should be. As I mentioned, both our Budget Advisory Committee and our College Planning Committee recommended that we have a 15% reserve. We're a little bit under that. And then there's three other categories of funding.
Excuse me, did you say our Budget Advisory Committee recommended 15% for this line item or in totality? The entire reserves for unrestricted general funds?
It would be in totality.
Okay, so how much, is this something that we set, this percentage for this line item?
Just what we did here is we were showing that we have our 5.5% board mandated reserve, we have our enrollment shortfall and our vacation and load banking reserve. So the balance then would be going towards that institutional effectiveness goals. In this presentation and in actuality, that's only about 6.25%.
Okay, great, thank you.
So here is a 7-year trend of where we are on our salaries and benefits as a percentage of our total expenses and other outgo. As I mentioned, we're usually ranging around 87 to 89% historically with our salaries and benefits. In the 15-16 year, that was what we were discussing. It's currently at 83.8%, but I think that's artificially low due to the $6.2 million in one-time funds. So that's really technically around 88.2% is where we are at this point in time.
Vice President Gable, for the adopted budget, can you show both those numbers for the board so that they know what the percentage is with the 6% or whatever the number turns out to be for mandated costs and what it is pulled out?
Yes, definitely. The surplus and deficit, so you see here that we have had 2 years of actual deficits, and then we have 4 years of surpluses, and then in 15-16 we're projecting a deficit again. The ending fund balance, you see how that's ranged in 9-10 from 13.5 million. We're projecting it to be at 18.6 within this tentative budget. And then the bottom line there is the ending fund balance as a percentage of the total expenses and other outgo. And again, that's ranging from 12.4% in 9-10 to 14.8% within the tentative budget in 15-16. So some of the future budget challenges that we have on the horizon is, we've hired 27 new full-time faculty. In actuality, we've hired more than that, but we've had some retirees. And so, I think our net goal of what we were trying to reach was about 27. We're continuing to monitor our full-time faculty obligation. We won't know until the fall whether or not we met our full-time faculty obligation for the fall of 15. At this point, I'm crossing my fingers that we will meet it and not have another penalty. I think it's going to be very close, though. So we're hoping that we will get there. There's also the sunset of Proposition 30 revenues. That's the education protection account funding that comes in. So as the board already acted on our estimation of $15.8 million coming in for the 15-16 year, 19% of that money comes from sales tax, about 81% comes from income taxes. The sales tax piece is going to terminate at the end of 2016, so that's about 20% of that funding. We could lose at the end of 2016, so in 16-17. And then the income tax is set to terminate at the end of 2018. So we don't know if those taxes will be extended. We don't know what the state budget is going to look like when those taxes expire, if they do expire. But it is just a cautionary note that currently those taxes are set to expire, and it's a big chunk of money that comes into our district. So,
Can I just, because the fact that Proposition 30 was passed by the voters, to extend this, will it also have to take a vote of the people again?
If you are going to extend Proposition 30, it would require vote by the voters. Legislature could enact taxes, but the chances of that happening are slim to none, and the governor has publicly stated that he will not support an extension of Proposition 30.
So from a planning perspective, that money's going to go away, in all probability. Okay.
Right, and it'll be gradual, because remember, these terminate mid-fiscal year. So at this point, if the taxes continue to come in at the rate they're coming in, we would lose 1.5 million in 16-17, another 1.5 million in 17-18, and then we would lose 6.4 million in each 18-19 and 19-18. So we have some time to plan, but I think this is the cautionary note for the board, that it is something that we need to continue to keep our eye on moving forward into horizon. And 16-17 is going to be here before we know it.
May I ask a- And isn't the STRS contribution rate also going up, and also PERS?
Yes,
Oh,
it
that-
is.
oh, sorry.
Led me right into the next slide. Perfect question. So you see there, our state pension obligations are increasing as well. Both STRS, which is projected to go up to 19.1% by 2021, and PERS is projected to go up to 20.4% by 2021. And so this last slide here shows the impact on the district by fiscal year. So you see each, in 16-17, we're looking at about a $1.2 million increase in our expenditure just for those two line items. In 17-18, it's much more significant because the PERS rate has increased considerably more. So that's about a 1.7 million increase. But overall, within the next 5 years, we're looking at $6.2 million increases just for STRS and PERS. So that concludes my presentation on the tentative budget. I'll open it up to any more questions anybody may have.
Members of the board, questions this time?
I have questions.
Chair recognizes Trustee Zia.
Thank you, Vice President Gable. Fantastic job to you and to your team. I have a few questions. I'm trying to summarize them. So in the tentative budget, page 3, there is a reference for unrestricted general funds and the management reorganization. There's going to be 290,000. If you could speak to that and what that entails, and also what that means as far as personnel is concerned, if any.
Yes, the 290,000 for the management reorganization includes two different reorganizations, one within the college advancement and economic development area, and another one within academic affairs, where we are eliminating an associate director of grants position, but then we're creating a director of instructional resource development position. Under academic affairs, we are, at this point in time, defunding the associate vice president of the Pacific Coast campus and creating a dean of academic services. We are also filling a vacancy that has been vacant for several years. That's the director of the superintendent president's office. And then we have created a director of nursing in accord with the CCA tentative agreement that was signed and ratified last fall. Now, I will say the director of the superintendent president's office is going to be grant funded for at least the next one fiscal year, potentially two.
And how, I see, this is where I get a little lost, and perhaps the veteran members can help me understand. Why is this not coming to the board for our review, this structural change? Usually with budgets, we get, typically agencies that I've worked with, public agencies have organization charts that they submit. And again, it could be, I'm not criticizing, I'm just asking why it's not coming to us for approval. And then what each line item, how much are we talking about for each person? Why are we defunding an associate vice president at the PCC campus? Who's going to be responsible for that campus if we're defunding that position?
So to answer that question, basically, you charge the superintendent president with the responsibility to oversee the college. And within that, it's my responsibility to hire, to propose layoff, to review organizational structure. So that is all delegated to the superintendent president. It is the board's role to review the budget associated with the goals that the board sets, and to question, certainly, I mean, you are more than welcome to question any line item. But the reason it doesn't come for approval is because the organizational structure is delegated to the authority of the superintendent president. And that is also an accreditation requirement that the superintendent president has the ability to manage the organization to ensure that the resources are deployed to in alignment with the college's instructional master plan, educational master plan, as well as any other issues that come up with regard to serving the mission of the college.
No, I understand that, and thank you for providing input about the accreditation. But like some sort of an organizational chart, if there are any changes, it would be nice to see that in the budget. And I don't particularly understand why we're defunding this, what the rationale for defunding an associate vice president at PCC is, and having a director. I think it's called, if I recall correctly, is what you said, Vice President Gable, and correct me if I'm wrong, at College Advancement and Economic Development. What was the thought process in doing so? Because, as it is, I've heard a lot that PCC campus needs a lot of support and needs support from us as the board, and I don't really get where that Associate Vice President defunding comes from. If you can help me understand, I'd appreciate it.
I'd be happy to. It has been the recommendation of the vice president that a new organizational structure be considered and put in place. Actually, you've led me to an item that I was going to highlight later on, which is our current Associate VP of the Pacific Coast Campus, Dr. Meena Singhal. Today is her last board meeting in that role. She is stepping down from that position. And it gives the Vice President of Academic Affairs, who is responsible for that position, the opportunity to look at her organization and determine what is the best organizational structure to fulfill the mission and goals of the college. And so I support that recommendation, and that's why we are defunding it and creating a dean of academic services.
Okay, well, if you could keep in mind that campus is needs some care as well as this campus, it would be great, and I'm sure you will.
I always do.
Yes. And how much does each, what are we talking about as far as the total 290,000? How much for each person are we talking about for that is before us?
Well, the 290,000 is the net impact of eliminating some of the positions that were on the books and creating the new positions. So that's the net impact of those 6 changes that are being made.
I understand that. It would be nice to see a detailed line item at some point of what that entails. So page 4, the next page, you have, I believe it's about 3 million. Yeah, I think it's in this item. So we were talking about health benefits, and I think in the last board meeting, a couple of board meetings, there were Burnham did a report that they could save us $3 million. So is that something that is going to be factored in at some point, or was that just assumed conservatively that we're not going to get the savings and we're going to assume we don't have that savings, even though it was reported by them, by our own broker?
Well, I think what you're referring to, what was publicly announced to the board, was done so by the CCA president at the time, Dr. Lynn Shaw, where she had sat in on a Health and Welfare Benefits Committee meeting where Burnham Benefits, our broker, had done a comparison of our plan versus both CalPERS and I believe it was CISC, which are either a trust or a JPA, so other plans that are out there, and they did a line item by line item comparison on could the district save money if we were to enter into a joint powers authority or a trust for our health benefits rather than contracting ourselves. Right now we have our own plan. And the results of that side-by-side comparison were that we could potentially save $3 million by going into that trust or JPA, but our plans would change pretty significantly, especially on the PPO side. So any change that we would want to do to our health and welfare benefits that are offered to our employees is something that would have to be negotiated with both AFT and with CCA. And so we just aren't to the point yet on whether or not either of those parties are interested in entering into negotiations to reduce the benefits that the employees currently have, because it would definitely increase, I would say, our employees' out-of-pocket expenses for those employees that are in the PPO plan. So we will, that's kind of a wait and see to see if the unions are interested in trying to negotiate that. But it would be some pretty substantial changes to what we currently offer.
Well, and also, just to be clear on your question, Trustee Zia, that was never a recommendation to the board. There was never a report done for the board. These discussions have only been taking place within the Health and Welfare Benefit Committee, which has representation by all the employee groups. And it would require all of those employee groups to either, one, agree that we wanted to make those changes, and then we would begin the process of negotiating those changes, or B, the board would have to suggest next time the benefits are open for negotiations to put that on the table.
Okay, fair enough. So I see in our actuals, estimated actuals in 2014 and 15 on page 5, for the contracting services and operating expenses, that item is, if you could speak to that and why it's we have that change or that increase.
That was, as I mentioned on the presentation, the reason that both of those line items are increasing is primarily related to the $6.2 million in mandated costs that we have allocated on a one-time basis.
So can you provide a little bit more clarity of the breakdown of that of the amounts that we're talking about here? How much is for scheduled maintenance projects? How much for technology or any other item that you may have? So it's both contracting services and other outgo is what I'm referring to on that page 5 of the tentative budget.
Right, so there is $2.3 million that is allocated for scheduled maintenance projects. There's over $2 million that has been allocated for the technology refresh. There's $513,000 that was allocated for instructional equipment. There's a $200,000 that's been allocated for professional development. There's another $200,000 for the communication plan implementation. $200,000 for the website design and implementation. We have $50,000 for our Title IX compliance implementation, $100,000 for our Innovate SoCal, another $100,000 for our educational master plan development, and then there's been $581,000 allocated across the board to all the departments that represents a 10% increase in the discretionary budgets.
Okay, and what are those numbers based on? Is it something that is based on past expenditures or past deficits or areas of needs that
These
we've
numbers
seen.
are based upon the vice president level plans that were initiated on the scheduled maintenance side. That's our 5-year deferred maintenance plan that's submitted in October. The technology refresh came directly from the IITS division plan, as well as every item that was listed was a request for an augmentation that was developed from the department plans up through the division plans that then led into the vice president plan. So it's the planning that's done college-wide of how the numbers are derived.
And what's that 10% across the board based on?